Jack Miller stepped off the transport ship and took his first breath of air on the Galactic Academy of Sciences space station. The air felt too clean, almost sterile. It lacked the richness of Earth's atmosphere with its countless particles of dust, pollen, and the slight tang of pollution that humans had grown used to over centuries. A small welcoming committee waited for him in the docking bay. Jack smiled at the 3 aliens standing there. He recognized their species from his briefing. Materials. The tall, willowy figure with blue-tinted skin and 4 arms was clearly a Lumari. The short, stocky being with thick, rubbery skin must be a Hydraxian. The 3rd alien, floating slightly above the ground in what looked like a personal gravity. Field was a Gasparian. "Welcome to the Galactic Academy of Sciences, human Jack Miller," the Lumari said, her voice musical and high-pitched. "I am Professor Zixtil, Safety Coordinator for the Academy. These are my assistants, Instructor Glue and Administrator Vep." Jack extended his hand before remembering that handshakes weren't universal. He quickly pulled it back. "Thank you for the welcome. I'm excited to be the first human in the exchange program." Professor Zixtil's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession. "Yes, quite, we are. Pleased to host a representative from Earth, though I must say there has been some concern among the board members." "Concerns?" Jack asked, picking up his duffel bag and slinging it over his shoulder. The 3 aliens flinched slightly at the casual way he lifted what must have seemed like a heavy weight to them. "Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world," Administrator Vep said, his voice coming from a translator device, since Gasparians communicated through scent pulses. "No other Class 12 species has ever attended the Academy." Jack tried not to sigh. He had expected this. In the 6 months since Earth had joined the Galactic Union, humans had quickly gained a reputation as unusually tough. The conditions on Earth, its gravity, weather patterns, temperature ranges, and even its bacterial and viral load were considered extremely hazardous by most galactic standards. "I assure you, I'm not dangerous," Jack said with a smile he hoped was reassuring. "Of course not," Professor Zixtel said quickly. "But safety protocols must be followed. You will need to complete the standard 6-week safety training before beginning your maintenance engineering duties." 6 weeks? Jack frowned. "But I have 20 years of experience as a maintenance engineer on Earth and 5 years on lunar bases. I've worked in vacuum, radiation environments, and underwater facilities." All 3 aliens stared at him with expressions that Jack interpreted as shock. "Nevertheless," Professor Zixtil said, "regulations are regulations. The training begins tomorrow at first cycle. Now, let us show you to your quarters." As they led him through the station, Jack noticed other aliens stopping to stare at him. Most kept their distance. He heard whispers of Deathworlder and dangerous gravity well. Jack's quarters were larger than he expected, with a bed that seemed unnecessarily wide and soft. The gravity was noticeably lighter than Earth's, making him feel like he could jump to the ceiling with minimal effort. "We've adjusted your living space to Earth-standard atmospheric composition," Instructor Glue explained, his voice bubbling slightly. "But we kept the gravity at Academy standard. We hope this is acceptable." "It's fine," Jack said, though he knew he'd need to exercise rigorously to prevent muscle atrophy. "I appreciate the accommodation." After the welcoming committee left, Jack unpacked his few belongings. He placed a small potted cactus on the windowsill, overlooking the vast expanse of space and the blue-green gas giant the Academy orbited. The plant, a simple barrel cactus from Arizona, was his small reminder of Earth. A soft chime indicated someone at his door. Jack opened it to find 3 young aliens standing there. They weren't species he recognized immediately. "Hello, human." "Jack Miller," said the tallest one, who had fins along her arms and gills on her neck. "I am Vela from Hydros." These are my classmates, Nix from Luma and Krell from Gasper. We wanted to welcome you properly." Jack smiled, pleasantly surprised. "Please just call me Jack, and thank you. Would you like to come in?" The three students glanced at each other, then entered cautiously, as if stepping into a predator's den. "Is it true that you can break bones with your bare hands?" Nix asked. He was thin and pale, with large, luminous eyes that suggested adaptation to low light. "Well, technically, yes, and you can survive temperature variations of over 40 degrees?" Krell interrupted. Unlike the floating Gasparian Jack had met earlier, Krell wore what appeared to be a heavy exosuit. "That's normal on Earth," Jack explained. "We have deserts where daytime temperatures can reach 50 degrees Celsius then drop below freezing at night." All three aliens made sounds of astonishment. "But the most interesting thing," Vila said, her gills fluttering with excitement, "is that you're going to take the safety training. No Deathworlder has ever participated. We're all taking the course too, as part of our xenobiology studies. We want to observe you, if that's acceptable." Jack laughed. "I'm going to be a lab specimen, am I?" "Oh no." Nix looked horrified. "We would never—" "It's a joke," Jack assured him. "On Earth, we often use humor to deal with uncomfortable situations. Yes, you can observe me during training. It might be the most exciting thing that happens there." The next morning, Jack reported to the Safety Training Center. It was a large, sterile room with rows of what looked like very comfortable chairs. Each seat had a neural interface designed to provide immersive training scenarios. Professor Zixtil stood at the front, along with about 20 alien students. Jack spotted Vila, Nix, and Krell in the back row. They waved enthusiastically when they saw him. "Welcome to Basic Safety Protocols," Professor Zixtil announced. "Today we begin with Module 1, recognizing and avoiding minor gravitational hazards." Jack took his seat, noticing how the chair adjusted to support his heavier human frame. This was going to be a long 6 weeks dot as the first simulation began. Showing the dangers of a 20-centimeter step, Jack heard Vila whisper to her friends, "Watch carefully. This is where we'll see if Deathworlders really do laugh in the face of danger." Jack couldn't help but smile. Maybe this assignment would be interesting after all. Not because of any actual dangers he might face at the pristine academy, but because of the chance to change how these aliens viewed humans and perhaps, in the process, how they viewed themselves and the universe around them. The simulation continued, warning about the severe injuries possible from a small fall. Jack held back a laugh, remembering how as a child he had jumped from trees 3 meters high just for fun. Yes, this was definitely going to be an interesting 6 weeks. 3 days into the safety training, Jack was ready to climb the walls out of boredom. The simulations moved at an agonizingly slow pace. Today's lesson focused on the dangers of lifting objects weighing more than 2 kilograms without proper mechanical assistance. "Remember," Professor Zixtil said, her 4 arms gesturing to highlight important points on the holographic display. "Even a mass of 2 kilograms can cause severe muscular strain if lifted incorrectly. Always use the provided gravity nullifiers for anything heavier." Jack glanced around the room. The alien students were taking careful notes, their expressions serious. Only Vela, Nix, and Krell occasionally looked his way with curiosity in their eyes. "Now we will have a practical demonstration," Professor Zixtil announced. "Each student will approach the test object and demonstrate proper lifting technique using the safety equipment." The test object was a metal box that, according to its label, weighed exactly 3 kilograms. One by one, the alien students approached it, activated small devices that reduced its weight, and carefully lifted it using elaborate harnesses that distributed the remaining weight across their bodies. Jack's turn came, He walked up to the box without taking any of the safety equipment. "Human Jack," Professor Zixtil said sharply, "you must use the gravity nullifier and the lifting harness." Jack picked up the box with one hand and held it out. "This is how we lift things on Earth. 3 kilograms is nothing to a human. Our children carry heavier school bags." The room went completely silent. Several students moved back in their seats, as if afraid Jack might throw the box at them. "That is ... double quotes." Professor Zixtil seemed at a loss for words. "That is extremely dangerous behavior. Please place the object down immediately." Jack set the box down gently. "I'm sorry if I alarmed anyone. I was just trying to demonstrate that humans have different physical capabilities." "Different is one way to put it," muttered an alien student from the back. After class, Vela, Nix, and Krell hurried to catch up with Jack in the corridor. "That was amazing," Krell said, the excitement making his exosuit emit small puffs of greenish gas. "You just picked it up like it was nothing." "On my world," Nix added, "lifting 3 kilograms would require 2 adults working together. The gravity on Luma is 1/6 of Academy standard." Jack smiled. "And Earth's gravity is about twice Academy standard. That's why I can do things that seem impressive to you." "It's not just strength," Vela said, her fins rippling thoughtfully. "You didn't seem scared at all. On Hydras, we learn from hatching that every action carries risk. But you just did it." "Humans assess risk differently," Jack explained as they walked toward the Academy's central atrium. "We evolved on a planet where danger was constant. Predators, weather, disease. We had to learn to function despite risks, not avoid them completely." The atrium was a vast open space with plants from hundreds of worlds growing in carefully controlled environments. Jack enjoyed coming here because some of the plants reminded him of Earth's forest dot. As they entered, a loud alarm began to sound. Red lights flashed along the walls. "Attention all personnel," an automated voice announced. "Environmental fluctuation detected in Atrium Section 3. Temperature variation of 4 degrees above standard. All students proceed to safety zones immediately." Around them, aliens began moving quickly toward marked exits. Some were activating personal protection fields. 4 degrees? Jack said incredulously. "That's nothing." "It could cause thermal shock in some species," Vela explained, her voice tight with worry. "We should go to the safety zone?" Jack shook his head. "I'm going to see what's causing it. Probably just a malfunction in the environmental controls. But the safety protocols," Nix began, "will take hours to implement," Jack finished. "Meanwhile, some of these plants might die from the temperature change. I can fix this in minutes." Jack started walking toward Section 3, where the temperature increase was detected. After a moment of hesitation, Vela, Nix, and Krell followed him. "We shouldn't be doing this," Krell whispered. "It's against all safety guidelines." "Consider it field research," Jack suggested with a grin. Section 3 contained plants from cooler worlds. Jack quickly spotted the problem. One of the cooling units was making an unusual noise and had stopped functioning. A small control panel on its side showed error codes. "Simple fix," Jack said, kneeling beside the unit. "The filter is clogged, and the backup didn't activate properly." He opened the maintenance panel without any tools and reached inside. The alien students gasped as Jack's hand disappeared into the machine. "Aren't you worried about mechanical entrapment?" Nix asked, his large eyes wider than usual. "Or thermal burns?" added Vela. "Or toxic coolant exposure." Krell's exosuit sensors were blinking rapidly. Jack shook his head as he worked. "The components aren't moving fast enough to trap my hand. The temperatures aren't extreme enough to burn. Human skin. And the coolant isn't toxic to humans. I checked the specifications when I arrived." With a few quick motions, Jack cleared the clogged filter and reset the system. The cooling unit hummed back to life, and the temperature began dropping immediately. "There," he said, standing up and wiping his hands on his pants. "Problem solved." Just then, a security team rushed into Section 3, led by Professor Zixtil. They stopped short when they saw Jack and the 3 alien students standing calmly by the now functioning cooling unit. "What is the meaning of this?" Professor Zixtil demanded. "You have violated at least 7 safety protocols." The proper procedure was to evacuate and wait for the maintenance team. The maintenance team would have taken hours to go through all the safety checks, Jack explained. "Some of these plants can't survive that long in higher temperatures. It was a simple clog that took me 30 seconds to fix." Professor Zixtil's 4 eyes blinked rapidly in what Jack had learned was a sign of agitation. "That is not the point. The rules exist for everyone's safety." "With respect, Professor," Vila said, stepping forward. Human Jack accurately assessed the risk level and determined it was safe for his species to perform the repair. And he was correct. "Yeah," Nix added. He knew exactly what he was doing. It was ... impressive. Professor Zixtil looked from the alien students to Jack and back again. "This is precisely why Deathworlders are so concerning. You take unnecessary risks and encourage others to do the same." "It wasn't unnecessary," Jack said calmly. "It was efficient. No one was in danger, and the problem is fixed." The security team began scanning the area, confirming that the temperature was indeed returning to normal parameters. "We will discuss this incident at tomorrow's safety review," Professor Zixtil said firmly. "For now, all of you are confined to quarters for the remainder of the day." As they left the atrium, Jack noticed other alien students watching them with a mixture of fear and fascination. Word of the incident would spread quickly. Was it worth it? Jack asked his 3 companions. Getting in trouble, I mean. Krell's exosuit lights pulsed in what Jack recognized as amusement. "Definitely. I've never seen anything like it. You just solved the problem. No committees, no risk assessments, no safety teams. That's how humans do things," Jack said with a shrug. "We see a problem, we fix it." "I think," Vila said thoughtfully, "there might be something important to learn from that approach." 2 weeks into the safety training, Jack had earned quite a reputation at the academy. Some aliens avoided him in the corridors, while others watched him with open curiosity. The incident in the atrium had been discussed at length during a special safety review where Jack received an official warning but was allowed to continue the training program. Vela, Nix, and Krell had become his constant companions. They peppered him with questions about Earth and human capabilities at every opportunity. Today, they sat together in the academy cafeteria, where Jack was eating a specially prepared meal designed to meet human nutritional needs. "So on Earth, you actually eat plants that produce mild toxins as a defense mechanism?" Vela asked, watching Jack bite into an apple. "Yes," Jack said, chewing. "We call many of them spices or vegetables. Some, like this apple, have evolved to be eaten so animals will spread their seeds." "Fascinating," Nick said, making notes on his datapad. "Your species evolved alongside these toxins and developed resistance." Jack nodded. "Many things that are dangerous to other species are harmless or even pleasant to humans. Coffee, for example, contains a stimulant that would be toxic to many of your species, but humans drink it daily." Their conversation was interrupted by a loud announcement over the Academy's communication system. "Attention, all personnel. Emergency. Training exercise will commence in 5 minutes. This is a scheduled drill. Please follow standard emergency protocols." "What's the drill today?" Jack asked. Krell checked the Academy schedule on his datapad. "Low oxygen scenario in the science labs. We simulate a life support failure and practice using emergency breathing apparatus." Jack finished his apple and stood up. "Let's go then." Maybe I'll actually learn something useful today. They arrived at the science labs just as the drill was beginning. Academy staff distributed emergency breathing masks to all students. The masks were designed to filter air and provide supplemental oxygen in case of atmospheric contamination or oxygen depletion. Remember, Professor Zixtil instructed as students put on their masks. In a real emergency, you would have approximately 15 minutes of oxygen. That is sufficient time to reach the nearest emergency shelter. Jack examined his mask with interest. It was lightweight and elegantly designed, with a small indicator showing oxygen levels. "Human Jack," Professor Zixtil said, approaching him, "I must inform you that this drill may be particularly challenging for your species. Earth has higher oxygen levels than Academy standard. Please alert staff immediately if you experience any respiratory distress." "I'll be fine," Jack assured her. "Humans can adapt to various oxygen levels. We live at high altitudes on Earth, where oxygen is much thinner than here." The professor didn't look convinced, but moved on to check other students. The drill began, with the lab's oxygen levels gradually decreasing. Warning lights flashed, and students practiced moving in an orderly fashion toward the designated emergency shelter. Jack followed along, finding the pace frustratingly slow. Suddenly, a reel. Alarm sounded, distinct from the drill warnings. "Attention all personnel," the automated system announced. "Containment breach in Xenobiology Wing. Hazardous specimens may be loose. All personnel evacuate immediately." This is not part of the scheduled drill. Repeat, this is a real emergency. Students and staff looked at each other in confusion. The science labs were adjacent to the Xenobiology Wing, where the Academy kept specimens from various worlds for study. "Remain calm," Professor Zixtil called out. "Continue to the emergency shelter as practiced. Security teams will handle the containment breach." As the group moved toward the shelter, Jack heard something that others didn't seem to notice. A faint cry for help coming from the direction of the Xenobiology Wing. Without hesitation, Jack broke away from the group and headed toward the sound. "Jack, what are you doing?" Vila called after him. "Someone needs help," Jack replied, already running down the corridor. "But the containment breach—" Nix protested. Jack didn't stop. "Keep going to the shelter. I'll be fine." To his surprise, he heard footsteps behind him. Vila, Nix, and Krell had followed him. "We're coming too," Vila said firmly. "We've been studying human risk assessment, remember?" Jack wanted to argue, but there wasn't time. "Stay behind me and do exactly as I say." They reached the entrance to the Xenobiology Wing. The door was locked down due to the emergency, but through the window, Jack could see the problem. One of the containment units had malfunctioned, releasing a thick yellowish gas that filled part of the lab. And trapped inside, unable to reach the exit, was a young alien researcher. "That's Researcher Plex," Krell identified. "And that gas ... It's ammonia-based, toxic to most oxygen breathers." Jack assessed the situation quickly. The gas is heavier than air. It's staying low to the ground. That's why Plex is trapped. The gas is between them and the door. "We need to call security," Nick said, reaching for his communicator. "No time," Jack replied. He examined the door lock. "I can force this open, but that gas will spill out. You three need to move back and stay at ceiling height." Before they could protest, Jack braced himself against the door frame and pushed with all his human strength. The emergency lock resisted, then gave way with a screech of metal. The door slid open partway, and some of the yellowish gas began to seep out into the corridor. "Back!" Jack ordered his friends, who quickly retreated. Jack took a deep breath, held it, and entered the lab. The gas swirled around his legs as he moved. He could feel it burning slightly on his exposed skin, but it wasn't unbearable. Years of working with industrial chemicals on Earth had exposed him to worse. Researcher Plex was huddled on top of a lab counter, clearly in distress. When they saw Jack, their eyes widened in surprise. Dot reached the counter and gestured for Plex to climb onto his back. The researcher hesitated, then understood and wrapped their 4 limbs around Jack's torso. Jack turned and headed back toward the door, moving carefully through the thickening gas. His lungs were starting to burn from holding his breath, but he kept going. At the door, he pushed Plex through first, into the waiting arms of Vela and the others. Then Jack himself stumbled out, finally taking a gasping breath of clean air. "The containment system," Jack wheezed, pointing back into the lab. "I can reset it from the main control panel." "No way," Vela said firmly. "You've already been exposed to the gas. We need to get you to medical." "The gas will spread," Jack insisted. "I can fix it now." Before they could stop him, Jack took another deep breath and plunged back into the lab. He moved quickly to the main control panel and began entering commands. His Earth education hadn't included alien technology specifically, but engineering principles were universal. He found the containment reset and activated it. Immediately, vents in the ceiling opened, and the gas began to be sucked away. Emergency. Force fields activated around the damaged containment unit, preventing more gas from escaping Dot when Jack emerged from the lab again. He found not just his friends waiting, but also Professor Zixtil and a security team in full hazmat gear. "Human Jack Miller," Professor Zixtil said, her voice a mixture of anger and amazement. "You have once again violated every safety protocol we have established." Jack coughed, his lungs still burning slightly from the ammonia exposure. "But I contained the breach and saved Researcher Plex." The professor stared at him for a long moment. "Yes," she finally admitted. "You did, but at great risk to yourself." "Calculated risk," Jack corrected. The ammonia concentration was high enough to be dangerous to Plex's species, but humans can tolerate brief exposure. I made a judgment call. A very human judgment call. Professor Zixtil noted Dot from his place being treated by medical staff. Researcher Plex called out, "Thank you, Human Jack. I would not have survived much longer in that atmosphere." Jack nodded acknowledgement, then looked at his 3 alien friends. To his surprise, they didn't seem shocked or horrified by his actions. Instead, they were watching him with what appeared to be growing respect. "Perhaps," Professor Zixtil said, thoughtfully, "there is something to this human approach to safety after all." News of Jack's rescue spread quickly through the academy. The human who had saved Researcher Plex from certain death became something of a celebrity. Students who had previously avoided him now approached with questions about Earth and humans. Even some of the professors showed new interest in the Death Worlder among them. 3 days after the incident, Jack was called to a special meeting of the Academy Board. He arrived at the Grand Conference Room to find not only Professor Zixtil and other administrators, but also his 3 friends Vila, Nix, and Krell, seated at a side table with recording devices. "Human Jack Miller," began the Academy Director, "an ancient Lumari with skin so pale it was almost translucent. We have convened to discuss the recent incidents involving you and to determine the best path forward." Jack stood straight, prepared to defend his actions. "I understand, Director." "First," the Director continued, "let me extend the Academy's official gratitude for your rescue of Researcher Plex. Our medical team confirms that without your intervention, Plex would not have survived." Jack nodded, relieved that at least he wasn't facing disciplinary action. "However," Professor Zixtil added, "your methods remain concerning. You repeatedly ignore safety protocols established over centuries of galactic cooperation." An older, Hydraxian professor leaned forward. "But perhaps that is precisely what we should be discussing. Are our safety protocols appropriate for all species, particularly those from death worlds?" This sparked immediate debate among the board members. Jack watched as they argued, some insisting that safety standards must be universal, others suggesting that different species might require different approaches. Finally, the director raised a hand for silence. We have invited students Vila, Nix, and Krell to share their observations of human Jack, as they have spent the most time with him. Vela rose first, her fins fluttering slightly with nervousness. Honorable directors, over the past 3 weeks, we have observed human Jack's approach to safety and risk. We have compiled data comparing standard Academy responses to human responses in various scenarios. She activated a holographic display showing charts and graphs. In simulated emergencies, Hicks continued, standing beside Vela, the human approach saved an average of 72% more time than standard protocols, while maintaining a safety margin that, while smaller than our standards, was still within acceptable parameters for most situations. Krell joined them, his exosuit lights pulsing as he spoke. Most importantly, when real emergencies occurred, such as the cooling unit failure and the containment breach, the human's actions prevented greater harm that might have occurred while waiting for standard protocols to be implemented. The board members murmured among themselves, examining the data presented. What exactly are you proposing? Professor Zick asked the students. We believe, Vela said confidently, that the Academy should consider developing a new approach to safety that incorporates lessons from Deathworld species, not to replace existing protocols, but to complement them. Jack was surprised. He hadn't realized his friends had been studying him so carefully, or that they would defend his actions. To the Academy board, the director looked thoughtful. Human Jack, what do you think of this proposal? Jack chose his words carefully. On Earth, we have a saying, different tools for different jobs. Our approaches to safety evolved based on our planet's conditions. Your species developed different approaches based on your worlds. Neither is wrong, but both could learn from each other. Could you elaborate? Asked a Professor Jack hadn't met before. Humans assess risk by balancing potential harm against potential benefit and the probability of success, Jack explained. We accept higher risk when the benefits are greater or when the situation is urgent. But we also prepare extensively and train to handle emergencies quickly when they arise. Like your response to the ammonia leak, noted the director. Jack nodded. I knew I could tolerate brief exposure to ammonia. I knew researcher Plex couldn't. The benefit outweighed the risk to me. But how do we teach such judgment? Professor Zick asked. Our safety protocols exist precisely because not everyone has good judgment. That's fair, Jack admitted. On Earth, we use both rules and training. Rules for everyday situations, but intensive training so people can make good decisions when the rules don't fit the situation. The board fell silent, considering his words. Finally, the director spoke. I propose the following. Human Jack Miller will be exempted from the remainder of standard safety training. Instead, he will work with Professor Zick and students Vela, Nix, and Krell to develop a pilot program on adaptive safety responses tailored for species with different environmental tolerances. Professor Zick looked surprised. Director, are you certain? The evidence presented is compelling, the director replied. And the rescue of researcher Plex demonstrated that there may be value in approaches we have not considered. It will be a limited program, carefully monitored. And so began Jack's new role at the Academy. Instead of sitting through tedious safety lectures, he worked with Professor Zick to develop training scenarios that taught students how to assess risks based on their own species' capabilities and the urgency of the situation. Vela, Nix, and Krell became his assistant instructors, helping to bridge the gap between human instincts and alien understanding. They created simple rules to help students determine when to follow standard protocols and when adaptive responses might be appropriate. One afternoon, as they were setting up for a practical exercise, Vela approached Jack with a question that had been bothering her. "Jack, are all humans like you? Do you all have this ability to assess risks and act decisively?" Jack laughed. "Not exactly. Humans vary a lot. Some are more cautious, some more reckless. But we all grew up on a world that forced us to deal with constant challenges." "It must be strange for you here," Nick said, "where everything is so controlled and safe." "It is," Jack admitted, "but I'm starting to see the value in your approach, too. On Earth, our reactive style means we sometimes take unnecessary risks or respond too late to slow developing problems." Krell's exosuit lights pulsed thoughtfully. "So both approaches have merit." "Exactly," Jack said. "That's why this program is important. We're not teaching aliens to be humans or humans to be aliens. We're creating something new that takes the best from both." The first test of their new program came sooner than expected. During a routine maintenance operation on the Academy's outer hall, a micrometeorite struck near a work team, causing a small breach. The standard protocol would have been full evacuation of the section, emergency force fields, and waiting for a specialized repair team. Instead, the workers, who had been through Jack's pilot program, quickly assessed the situation. Two of them, from a high-pressure world with natural vacuum resistance, stayed to make emergency repairs while the others evacuated. The breach was sealed in minutes, preventing damage to sensitive equipment and experiments. When Professor Zixtil reviewed the incident, she couldn't deny the success of the adaptive approach. "It appears," she told Jack later, "that we may have been overdue for some new perspectives on safety." Jack smiled. "That's the thing about safety. It's not about avoiding all risks. It's about handling them effectively when they inevitably arise." "A very Deathworlder perspective," Professor Zixtil noted, "but perhaps one the galaxy needs." 3 months had passed since Jack first arrived at the Galactic Academy of Sciences. The pilot program on adaptive safety responses had grown from a small experimental class to one of the most popular electives at the Academy. Students from dozens of species now eagerly signed up to learn the balanced approach to safety that combined careful planning with decisive action. Today was a special day. The Academy was hosting its first Adaptive Emergency Response competition. Teams of students from different species would face simulated emergency scenarios and be judged on both safety and effectiveness. Jack stood in the observation room with Professor Zixtil, watching as the teams prepared. His 3 friends, Vela, Nix, and Krell, had formed a team together and were currently in first place after 2 rounds of challenges. "I must admit," Professor Zixtil said, her forearms now relaxed in what Jack recognized as a comfortable posture, "when you first arrived, I was certain you would cause a disaster." Jack laughed. "And I thought all of you were ridiculously overcautious." "We were both right, in our own ways," the professor replied. "Your human approach was too risky by our standards. Our approach was too rigid by yours. And now we have something better than either," Jack said, watching as the next scenario began. This challenge simulated a power failure in a research lab with multiple hazards: falling temperature, rising radiation, and unstable chemicals. Teams had to rescue a dummy researcher and stabilize the lab systems before either the researcher died or the lab exploded. Jack watched with pride as Vela, Nix, and Krell approached the challenge. They moved with a confidence that hadn't been there 3 months ago. Instead of panicking or freezing at the multiple hazards, they quickly assessed the situation and divided tasks based on their species' strengths. Krell, whose exosuit provided radiation protection, headed straight for the radiation source to contain it. Vela, whose aquatic species could tolerate cold temperatures, focused on the cooling systems. Nix, with his sensitivity to chemical compositions, worked on neutralizing the unstable compounds. "They're not following standard protocol," noted another professor who had joined them in the observation room. "No," Professor Zixtil agreed. "They're adapting to the situation. Notice how they've prioritized the most immediate threats first, rather than following the checklist order." Jack nodded. "And they're using their natural abilities instead of relying only on equipment." The team completed the challenge in record time, with both the researcher and the lab intact. As they exited the simulation chamber, their faces showed the mixture of exhaustion and triumph that Jack had come to recognize in his students. "Outstanding work," Jack told them when they joined him in the observation room. "You've truly mastered the adaptive approach." "We had a good teacher," Vila said, her fins rippling with pleasure at the compliment. "Several good teachers," Nix corrected, nodding to Professor Zixtil. "We learned as much about when to be cautious as when to act quickly." The professor's 4 eyes blinked in what Jack now knew was her version of a smile. "The balance is what matters. That is the lesson we have all learned." Later that day, after the competition ended, with Vila, Nix, and Krell taking first place, the Academy Director called a special assembly. All students and staff gathered in the Grand Hall, where the Director stood on a raised platform. "Today marks an important milestone in Academy history," the Director announced. "For centuries, we have approached safety from a single perspective, the prevention of all possible harm through extensive protocols and cautious action. While this approach has served us well in many ways, recent events have shown us its limitations." Jack stood at the back of the hall, listening with interest. He hadn't known about this assembly or what the Director planned to announce. The success of the Adaptive Safety Response Program, developed by human Jack Miller and Professor Zixtil, demonstrates that there is value in considering multiple approaches to safety. Therefore, the Academy Board has unanimously approved the establishment of a new department, Comparative Safety Methodologies. Murmurs of surprise and interest spread through the hall. This department will study how different species approach risk and safety, with the goal of developing more flexible and effective protocols for our diverse galactic community. And I am pleased to announce that Professor Zixtil has agreed to serve as its first chairperson. The hall erupted in applause. Jack clapped loudly, genuinely happy for the professor who had gone from his strictest critic to his strongest ally. Additionally, the Director continued when the noise died down, "I am pleased to announce that human Jack Miller has accepted a permanent position at the Academy as our first Deathworld safety consultant." Now it was Jack's turn to be surprised. He had been offered the position just yesterday and hadn't told anyone that he had decided to accept. "And finally," the Director said, "I am most excited to announce that, based on the success of our first human exchange, the Academy has approved the acceptance of 5 more human students for the next academic year. They will arrive next month, and I expect all of you to welcome them with the same respect and curiosity that has made human Jack's time here so productive." After the assembly, Jack was surrounded by students and staff offering congratulations. In the midst of the crowd, he found Vela, Nix, and Krell waiting to speak with him. "So you're staying," Vela said, her tone pleased. Jack nodded. "Turns out I have more to teach here than I realized, and more to learn. And more humans are coming." Nix added excitedly, "Do you think they'll be like you?" Jack laughed. "No 2 humans are exactly alike. Some will be more cautious than me, some possibly even more reckless. But they'll all bring their Deathworld perspective, which is what matters. What will you do first in your new role?" Krell asked. Jack thought for a moment. "I want to develop a true exchange program. Not just humans teaching aliens, but aliens teaching humans. Earth could benefit from some of your careful planning and preventative approaches." A two-way exchange, Professor Zixtil said, joining their group. That is precisely what I hoped you would say. The universe has too many challenges for any one species to face alone. We are stronger together, combining the careful planning of garden worlds with the adaptive resilience of death worlds. As Jack looked around at the diverse beings that had become his friends and colleagues, he felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond his original mission. He had come to teach aliens about human approaches to safety, but in the process, he had helped create something entirely new, a balanced methodology that respected different evolutionary backgrounds while recognizing universal principles. You know, Jack said to his friends, on Earth we have an old saying, safety isn't the absence of danger, but the presence of proper preparation. I think we've proven that proper preparation can take many forms. And that Deathworlders, Vili, added with a smile, definitely don't need standard safety training. But they make excellent safety teachers, Professor Zixtil concluded. Perhaps the best in the galaxy.